So hey guys, welcome to another Warframe video, and today we're going to check out the Secura Lecta, which is a new electricity-based whip that you can get by reaching the rank of partner under the Perrin sequence, which is the highest rank, and it costs whopping 125,000 standing. The Secura Lecta, just like all the other Syndicate melee weapons, doesn't have a Syndicate proc like the primary and the secondary weapons, but it has a unique mechanic. And the mechanic is actually pretty awesome, because the enemies killed by the Secura Lecta will drop double credits. Now, the unique mechanic isn't the only upgrade for the Secura Lecta. It also has higher base damage of 75 versus the original's 45, faster attack speed of 1.25 versus the original's 1, and an additional depolarity, which I wouldn't really call an upgrade unless you really like Life Strike. And all the other stats are the same, so it only has 5% critical chance, which is very low, below average critical multiplier of 150%, but a very good 25% status chance. This is really good, especially on a weapon that doesn't have physical damage and has raw electricity damage, which is the elemental damage, which creates the strongest elemental combos in the game, so you can pick and choose what kind of status procs you want to inflict on the enemy. And that's because the game is biased towards physical damage proc, so if you have Toxin and Slash, it will proc Slash more often. And on most weapons that is not preferable because the elemental combo procs are much better. Now I'm going to show you two different builds for the Secura Lecta, and the first one is the budget build. This doesn't require any forma investment, you can just slap it on and have a lot of fun. So the stance we're going to use is Burning Wasp because it matches the polarity and gives us a ton of mod capacity, and personally I'm using fully ranked Life Strike. This is just a personal preference. I like to tap channeling, hit the enemies once and get all my health back. Then I'm using Pressure Point for more damage, Fury for more attack speed, and Reach for more range. This is really good because whips have pretty good range on their side attacks because the whip extends quite far, and overall it's just good on a status based weapons because it means that each swing will hit more enemies, and the more enemies you hit, the more status you spread. Now I have three different setups for this, and on this one I'm using Voltaic Strike and Virulent Scourge for corrosive damage, and Volcanic Edge and Molten Impact for heat damage, and this is the one I would use versus the Infested and the Corrupted. Now, if you don't have all the dual stat mods, or if you're willing to sacrifice on a status chant for more damage, you can easily swap any of the dual stat mods for a 90% elemental mod. This way, the weapon will do a lot more damage, but you will not proc status as often. On config B, I have a setup that I like to use versus high-level Grineer and high-level Corpus, and it has Voltaic Strike and Volcanic Edge for radiation damage, and Virulent Scourge with Vicious Frost for viral damage. And finally, on config A, I have more crowd control focused setup, so I'm running Virulent Scourge and Voltaic Strike for corrosive damage, which will strip away the enemy armor, and I'm running Vicious Frost with Volcanic Edge for blast damage, and this is what's going to provide us with crowd control, because blast damage knocks enemies down. And now let's check out the build that I actually use on the weapon. So it is a 3-forma build, and what I did with that forma is added 3 Vs for the primed mods. So I kept the Burning Wasp stance because it just fits the polarity, and it's a pretty good stance, I actually kind of like it. Then I'm using Primed Pressure Point for a lot more damage, Primed Fury because the weapon is not Berserker viable, and Primed Reach, which is going to add a lot of range. Now unfortunately I don't have it maxed, but I'm working on it. Now I'm using Body Count, and one thing that people tend to forget about with Body Count is it adds a ton of damage because it makes building the combo counter up very trivial. Now I'm combining it with Weeping Wounds, which is one of the Acolyte mods, and this one increases your status chance based on your combo counter. Now this does add a lot of status chance, especially as you start building up your combo, but for me, with only 25% base status chance on the Secura Lecta, that's not enough, so I'm still using one dual stat mod, which on this setup is Virulent Scourge. And you will understand why when we take a look at this spreadsheet, which was kindly provided by Mr. Trinity809 on the wiki. If you only have 25% status chance, you will only get to 70% status chance if you have 4 times multiplier. And that, with a whip, takes about 15 minutes, which for me is a little bit too much. And when you add at least one dual stat mod, that time will be significantly reduced. But then again, that's just what I use, so if you want to use another 90% elemental mod, go right ahead. And to finish this setup off, I'm using Shocking Touch and Molten Impact, so I have corrosive and heat damage. On config B, everything is the same, but I once again have a different elemental setup, so I have Fever Strike and North Wind for viral damage, and then I have Volcanic Edge, which will combine with the electricity damage from the Secura Lecta to create radiation damage. And this is once again the setup I use versus very high level Grineer and high level Corpus. And finally, on config C, we once again have the more crowd control focused setup. So I have Vicious Frost and Molten Impact, which creates blast damage, and then I have Fever Strike, which will combine with the electricity damage from Secura Lecta and give me corrosive damage. Now, before we move on, I would really like to ask you to give me some feedback on the previous section where I had the budget and the big boy build, let's just call them, because I have a feeling that it may have been a little bit too long. But anyway, the original Lecta was already a pretty good status weapon, and now the Secura Lecta has better stats and makes enemies drop more credits. Yeah, it's a pretty good melee weapon, and it's already my go-to weapon for Necros, because why would I not want to get more credits while I'm farming with Necros? I really like status weapons, especially melee status weapons, because it's fun to just swing a web and see the armor just disappear off the enemies or confuse them with radiation, cut their health in half with viral damage, or knock them on their arse with blast damage. The utility of status weapons is just really good, and that's not to say that this weapon doesn't do damage. It does quite a bit of damage actually. It's not as good as a pure raw damage weapon or a crit weapon, but it's still pretty damn good. However, it does have a couple of downsides. For one, the slam attack range is pretty puny, it is very small, and some of the combos can make it pretty hard to hit enemies that are close to you, which is especially annoying if you're fighting the infested. But I would definitely recommend this weapon, because if you're not a veteran that has like 80 million credits, you'll be farming credits all the time for Endofusion, for Barraketeer, for trading and stuff like that, and this is the only weapon in the game that makes enemies drop more credits, so it's the best weapon for farming credits. And if you combine it with Necros, maybe you buy a booster from Barraketeer and you jump into a Dark Sector mission, you'll be getting a ton of credits. So as I've said already, if you're not sure whether or not to buy this weapon, go for it, it's really good. And that's pretty much it for the video, so I thank you very much for watching as always, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.